Good afternoon. My name is Steve Poftak. I'm the General Manager of the MBTA. It is my pleasure to welcome you here today on the 123rd anniversary of the original Green Line. I want to take a moment to thank some of the folks who've joined us here today. I want to thank Governor Baker, who we're going to be hearing from in a moment. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Polito. The Baker-Polito administration has been a huge support for the MBTA in terms of getting these projects done. I also want to thank Secretary Pollack for her ongoing support and guidance of not only the MBTA but transportation in this state. I want to pay particular credit to the entire Green Line transformation team over here, led by Angel Pena and Desiree Patrice. They have done an amazing job this summer, and I will tell you in some detail all the work that they have done, but we really appreciate all the work they've done. I want to thank the Museum of Fine Arts for hosting us today, and thank the director of the MFA, Matthew Teitelbaum, for hosting us here today. Also want to thank the Fenway Alliance for their work in getting this project done. We are here to celebrate the completion of 28 days of accelerated work here on the E Branch. This work is part of the MBTA's $8 billion capital program, where we are building a better T. This plan was designed to quicken the pace of work on the MBTA, and while we had done a lot of pre-planning to quicken this work, we had the opportunity to accelerate a number of projects over this spring and summer to take advantage of the fact that we're seeing lower riderships during the COVID-19 pandemic. For 28 days this August, the E-Branch service was replaced with shuttle buses and increased service on the Route 39 so we could get more work done and more work done faster. In fact, the 28 days of work that we were able to do allowed us to avoid a year's worth of weekend shutdowns to get this work done. And in fact, in those 28 days, we were able to exceed our replacement goals, replacing over 3 miles of track that was 30 years old and at the end of its service life. It's allowed us to provide a more reliable, faster trip for Green Line riders. We also upgraded 7 road crossings and 5 individual pedestrian track crossings. We made station improvements along the E-Branch, and as you can see as we walk through the station, we've got new track, better intersections, upgraded maps. We've power washed the station and also done an extensive set of vegetation management. But it wasn't just about the E-Branch this summer. We also spent 28 days accelerating work on the C Branch. On the C Branch, we were able to replace 2.5 miles of track that was also 30 years old, upgraded 7 road crossings, 5 individual pedestrian crossings, and cleaned and enhanced all of the C line stations. In addition to our work on the C and E line, we also completed accelerated work on the D Branch, where we had 2 9-day diversions, which allowed us to do a number of improvements, including pulling almost 22,000 feet of cable, replacing 12,500 feet of rails, tie, and ballast, and doing work on 7 critical switches. And I know I've talked a lot about the Green Line, and I give credit to the Green Line team, but we've also done a lot of work in other places. On the Blue Line, we did a 14-day closure, which allowed us to do extensive work. On the Red Line, we also had a 14-day closure, which allowed us to repair 3,500 ties and repair the concrete. And more improvement work is coming. We'll be working on the B Branch this month, and we'll also be making improvements on the Red, Orange, and Blue Line throughout the year. So again, I want to thank the team that got this done at the MBTA. I want to thank our customers and patrons along this line and all the other lines where we've done diversion for their patience during this whole process, and we're happy to come back with better, more reliable service as a result of these investments. So again, thank you for joining me here today, and I'd like to now invite Governor Baker to share a few words with us.
Thanks, Steve, and let me reiterate your gratitude and congratulations to the G team. Nice job. I also want to thank Secretary Pollack for her leadership on this, and I also want to talk a little bit about some of the work that's been done to date on the Green Line. But before I get to that, I do want to share a quick update on COVID-19. At this point, over 2.4 million people have been tested in Massachusetts. Over the past week, there have been around 19,000 new individuals tested every day. That's up compared to the 7-day average of new individuals tested each day, which was around 9,000 in mid-June, 12,000 in mid-July, and around 15,000 in mid-August. That means we're doing more. We're also seeing an increase in the number of repeat tests performed on individuals. This indicates that people continue to request tests more than once over time and are taking advantage of the testing resources that are readily available across our Commonwealth. The 7-day average for the number of total tests conducted has been above 30,000 tests for most of the past 2 weeks and is currently averaging around 35,000 a day. That's up from a 7-day average for the total number of tests conducted in mid-June, which was around 11,000, in mid-July of around 16,000, and in mid-August of around 20,000. That increase shows that we're continuing to make progress in increasing access to testing in Massachusetts. Additionally, the Broad Institute announced a partnership with over 100 colleges and universities to provide testing for students and staff, and so far the Broad has conducted almost 400,000 tests through this initiative and plans to continue to do robust testing as schools welcome folks back to campuses to help stop the spread of COVID as well. And we're certainly grateful for the partnership that we've established with the Broad over the course of the past several months and look forward to continuing to work with them as we go forward. The state's positive test rate's around 1%, and it's been in that range for the past few weeks. Our hospitals are reporting, Lieutenant Governor and I were on the phone with them this morning, no issues with managing the care of COVID-19 patients and other patients in need of medical services and procedures. We've seen good progress and will continue to monitor data and pay close attention to higher risk communities. While the statewide statistics are in a great place, there still are several communities that are struggling with the transmission of COVID, and that's why we introduced a new system for color coding and providing ramped up resources and stricter enforcement in the communities that have higher levels of COVID. Continue to update that map every week so that residents can remain vigilant and informed about what's going on in their city or town. And while we're certainly pleased with the progress that we've made with respect to the spread of COVID, everyone needs to keep in mind that we only get to this point through the actions of every resident, employer, business, local official, state official, basically everyone here in the Commonwealth. It's taken an incredible amount of discipline, hard work, and sacrifice to get to this point with respect to COVID, and as we head into the fall, we should certainly not let up. No matter the numbers, everyone needs to be vigilant about wearing a mask, practicing good hygiene, and avoiding, wherever possible, large group gatherings, especially unorganized, unsupervised group gatherings. This highly contagious disease will be with us until there are better treatments or a vaccine, and we'll have to keep working to beat it down every day. Throughout the pandemic, as I've said before, state government continued to carry out the work the people of Massachusetts expected to do and to serve the people of the Commonwealth. For the MBTA, that's meant many things, but one of them is trying to take advantage of this time and the low ridership and the limited traffic to make upgrades to improve service and save taxpayer dollars along the way and get work done quickly. We just had a chance to look at some of the improvements that have been made on the Green Line's E branch here at the Museum of Fine Arts Station. And as the general manager pointed out, these upgrades are the result of a month-long service shutdown that enabled crews to complete infrastructure improvements more quickly and efficiently than typical. In fact, this shutdown enabled the T to accomplish the equivalent of 1 full year of weekend and night work in 28 days. The C branch of the Green Line was also shut down for the month of August, and that shutdown also enabled the completion of an amount of work that would have normally taken a full year. These sorts of measures are significant steps forward in working to improve service for riders, and in some cases it's happening much more quickly than previously planned. The shutdowns also helped the T save 30% on construction costs compared to a schedule that would have relied on all the issues around setting up and breaking down and doing night and weekend work. These upgrades replaced thousands of feet of track and upgraded several intersections and removed thousands of feet of what we call slow zones. That means these improvements will give Green Line riders faster and more reliable service. And by shutting down certain parts of the system for longer periods, the T obviously has the ability to stage differently and to make progress much more quickly. They're all part of the T's strategic approach to accelerate infrastructure projects across the system in 2020. It means implementing, in some cases, long-term diversions with alternative service options, like the ones on this Green Line route this summer. And because of the low ridership associated with the pandemic, the Green Line's been able to get this done with substitute service with very limited impact on riders. But as people gradually return to the system, and we were talking about the fact that we all drove through college move-in day on our way here, I think for the Lieutenant Governor and me, it's probably the first time we've been in traffic in a really long time. That will certainly provide additional riders for the system, and these shutdowns will make sure that the ride on the system is faster and more reliable. And best of all, it will have been done at a point in time when the students weren't here, when the schools weren't in session, which dramatically enhances both the quality of the work that gets done on an uninterrupted basis, but also dramatically limits the impact and the disruption that that type of work would have had doing it on nights and weekends all the way through the fall and into the winter. The transportation landscape obviously looks a lot different than it did in March, but we're still committed to improving the core infrastructure of the T to make the system more reliable and safer. We're currently in the midst, as most people know, of a 5-year, $8 billion capital investment plan, which is delivering a record level of spending on upgrades and modernization of the core system, signals, switches, tracks, all the stuff we love that never gets the attention it deserves, but has a profound impact on the system's capacity to serve the folks who ride it every day. And I want to thank the Green Line Transformation team for all of your work on this and on these other projects as well. I think anytime somebody can talk about delivering 118% of plan, 30% reduced costs in 1 month instead of 12, it's pretty good. Thank you. And I also want, yeah, good idea. And I also just want to say in closing that the T and its team have continued to work enormously hard through this whole period beginning in March to make sure that they were there to serve the riders who rely on the system. They've dramatically enhanced their cleaning protocols, created a new Rider Safe program campaign, and continue day after day to make sure people have the system they need to take them where they need to go. And with that, I want to turn it over to Secretary Pollack.
Thank you, Governor. It's my pleasure to be here on this beautiful day with Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito. Thank you. Who are not only apparently the most popular governing team in the 50 states of the United States, but are clearly the most popular team among those of us who care about transit and transportation because of their unwavering commitment to ensure that the MBTA has had the resources that it has needed since that awful winter of 2015 to rebuild the system. I want to second the governor's thanks to the men and women of the MBTA who have been on the job every day since the pandemic began, whether it's providing service, doing the maintenance work, doing the capital construction work, enhancing the safety team. We all owe an immeasurable debt of gratitude to our essential workers. Many people think of those essential workers as being our healthcare workers and our grocery workers, and they certainly are, but so are the men and women who make sure the transit is there for those who need the most, no matter how many or few riders there may be. I also want to remind all of us that when the plans began for the July surge on the C line and the August surge on the E line, the plan was to shut them down and get the work done before there was a pandemic. The idea from what we had learned after we experienced the damage to the Red Line was that we owed our passengers and the people of Massachusetts a faster, more efficient plan for fixing the T and for digging it out of the multi-billion-dollar maintenance deficit that it had experienced And in addition to celebrating the success of the surge work that the governor pointed out and that the general manager talked about, it's worth mentioning that the MBTA, it's not just a transformation of the Green Line. The MBTA has transformed itself into an agency that is capable of delivering more than $1.5 billion every year in capital improvements, and in fact has shown by managing the various surges this summer that it can deliver on the capital improvements that will dig the T out of its maintenance and good repair backlog in an accelerated time period. The increase in capital investment in the T in the state fiscal year that just closed exceeded the T's total spending on capital only a few short years ago. And so the real transformation that I've had the pleasure to watch and work with the T team with over these past 5 years is the transformation of the MBTA into an organization that is capable of delivering what these surges delivered, which is needed improvements to the system, delivered on time and on budget or better, with minimizing the disruption to the passengers. So even as the ridership comes back and the management of the alternate service will get more complicated, the group set out to prove that we could manage closures of weekday service in order to accelerate the repairs. And I think there's no question but that the 29 surge program proved that's possible. And I will look forward to continuing to work with the governor and lieutenant governor, General Manager Poftak and his team to plan for future surges and accelerated capital delivery that will give the T's customers what they need, which is a system that is fixed more quickly while minimizing the disruption to their daily commute. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite MFA Director Matthew Teitelbaum to speak to us. Thank you.
I'm going to be 2 minutes, so bear with me. I was born in Toronto. I lived in Boston. I was in Toronto when the Toronto Raptors came to be, and I watched Larry Bird. I came here today thinking the governor might give me just a little bit and say, you know what, I want the Celtics, but there's a little bit of me that wants rooting for the Raptors. I'm just here to say no such luck. There is not a single part of his being that wants the Raptors to do well. So now I'm going to say something else. But I just want to say the first time I did meet the governor, we spoke about basketball. We've been here in Boston for 150 years. We've been on this site since 1909. The T has gone in front of us for more than 80 years. We have been connected all that time. We are a public institution serving the public. The T is a public amenity serving the public. But we both do more than that. We create community. And we create community through connectedness. And one of the reasons why I'm so pleased for this moment is to acknowledge that the museum exists to bring people together in common cause, to share experience, and to be together, and that's what the T does as well. The T has a utilitarian function. We couldn't be the institution we are without the T. So many of our staff come. We are so thrilled we're going to open soon, and we're going to be using the T to bring our staff back. But I just want to say, in our root purpose, in our root cause, we do what all great public institutions must do, and that is create community, connectedness, and make people feel as though they belong together regardless of their background. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
At this point, myself or anyone else up here is happy to field questions. Sure, I think there's two pieces to that. The first piece is we very carefully track ridership, literally on a daily basis. On most of our bus routes, about 70% of our bus routes, in fact, we track it in real time. So we have a good understanding of where ridership is coming back. I think there's also potential for a longer-term process, which I know the Secretary is going to lead that, where we start to think about what are some of the longer-term trends in transportation. And I think those answers are not going to be immediate for us. And I think as we get smarter about the progression of this virus, and we listen to, frankly, the voices of a number of stakeholders, we'll be engaging in that longer term planning process as well. Sure. The bus ridership has come back more strongly. We're up to about 160,000 trips per day on the bus, about 42% ridership. Subway is somewhat closer to 100,000 trips a day, about 26% ridership. There is variation across line. The Blue Line has the highest percentage of ridership that's come back, with the other lines behind that. So that is something we are tracking very carefully. I think we didn't necessarily have a sense of anticipation. I would say it is coming back incrementally. We have not seen, as we progress through the phases of reopening, we have not seen any sort of big inflection points where thousands of riders have come back on a single day. We continue to see that an upward slope that we will track. I think we're looking very carefully at September. Perhaps we see an influx of college students here. We'll see if that increases ridership as well. We've seen in a number of cases where we've been able to lower speed restrictions, which is a shorter trip for our customers. If I have my numbers right on the E-branch, we've taken about 60 seconds off an average customer's trip, which across a large number of ridership, that matters to people. So we will continue. The speed restrictions is something we track. Again, literally on a daily basis, and the long-term trend has been downward, and these projects only contribute to that.
I'll get to that in a sec. I rooted, like every good Eastern Conference Boston Celtics fan, I rooted for the Raptors last year in the NBA Finals because we should always stick with our side of the street when we're playing those dastardly teams from the West. And but I would certainly never root for them now. I think the way Massachusetts put together its mail-in voting program, which was obviously led by Secretary of State Galvin and the legislature. We provided supporting roles where we could, but they also had a lot of local officials involved in that, was the right way to do it, which was, to mail out an application to people, give people an opportunity to respond if they wanted to get a ballot. If they sent in the card that came with their initial mailing from the Secretary of State, that card would go in, go to their local community, and they would get back a ballot with an envelope that they could seal their ballot in. Looks just like the one you get today if you vote at the polling station, and send it back to the local community. And that makes it possible to cross-check all of the various names and addresses and all the rest to ensure that process has integrity. I don't anticipate that we're going to have issues with this. I think the big question will just be what the process local communities use to actually put the ballots into the ballot boxes. I mean, Swampscott, which is where I live, my understanding is they're going to take the ballots that people like me mailed in, and they're just going to put them right into the machines. And they'll be counted just like they would have been counted if you showed up and did it in your polling place. I think the expectation is there will be some differences with how locals do this. So it may be that in some cases we don't have total results until a little later. But I think the integrity of the process with respect to how the state set it up is actually quite high. And it does give people, particularly, no one knew when we went through this process what the positive test rate was going to be in communities around the Commonwealth or in the Commonwealth overall on Election Day. And when did we sign that? Was that May or June? I think it was May, wasn't it? In May, our positive test rate was, basically between 10 and 20%. We're obviously in a very different place now. But I think for a lot of people, if we were still in a place like that, they would be nervous about going to the polls or working in the polls and handling an election in a traditional manner. So I think Massachusetts did the right thing.
Did you say you mailed in your ballot?
I did.
The first time you got mail in?
Yes.
Why?
I wasn't sure where I was going to be on election day, and I actually, like I said, I think the process that the state put in place was a good one.
Who did you vote for in the Senate primary?
I voted for Kevin O'Connor.
Why?
Why? He's a terrific lawyer and knows a lot about what I would describe as the local government issues that I care the most about and state issues, and I think he's the best candidate.
Are you doing any different messaging moving forward towards November? Because there was a lot of confusion some people had, which is if I applied for the mail-in and I got it, but then the positivity rate down. Like if you can do that, I think there's a little bit of a clarification here. It's all new. So.
Yeah, I think it's all new, and I think obviously we'll learn a few things here, and I certainly anticipate that there will be guidance coming from the Secretary of State's office, and frankly from a lot of local communities, to the voters in their communities about what people learned during this process for the next one.
But it sounds like you're not worried about it, the mail-in process now or November.
Like I said, I think the way people set it up was pretty solid. The policy we put in place was a fairly simple one, which was if you have less than 6 cases per 100,000, you would be deemed travel safe. Massachusetts is at about 4.9 per 100,000. Most of Massachusetts, as you all know from the weekly report we put out on cities and towns, more than 300 cities and towns in Massachusetts are under 5. And that's the metric that we chose to use based on guidance we got from many others. I mean, part of the reason we picked the less than 5 and the less than 4 as the 2 metrics around school openings was because those were the metrics that were being used by the World Health Organization, by many other countries, and was based on guidance and advice from the CDC and Johns Hopkins about where to frame what you would consider to be quote-unquote safe. Rhode Island right now is at about 9 per 100,000, which is almost double it's 50% more than the number that we established as the benchmark.
What concerns did you have over the weekend that prompted the National Guard call?
So the way we handle almost everything associated with the state police or the Guard, especially when it comes to activation of the Guard, is driven by outreach from local communities. And there were somewhere between 45 and 50 events of one type or another that were posted on a variety of social media sites toward the end of last week. Some of them had very big numbers in terms of the anticipated attendance. And we heard from a number of municipal officials who asked us if we would have people available to support them if those events turned out to be bigger than what they would be able to manage on their own. And we did what we always do, which is we put out a message that we were activating accordingly, and then basically stayed in place unless and until we heard from local officials. The great thing about this is everybody came out, they did their thing, their voices were heard. We didn't hear from any municipal officials, and after we didn't hear from them, we deactivated them.
Did the feds request?
No, this was coming from local officials.
Would you feel safe riding the MBTA, Governor?
Absolutely.
Any plans to do so soon?
Yes. I was riding the Blue Line a lot in January and February, and I was actually kind of surprised that for one reason or another, the media never found out. But yeah, the answer is yes.
Any tweaks to the college kids coming back and you saw these kids moving in? Obviously getting the message to them.
Okay, so every kid we saw was wearing a mask. Every single one, which was awesome. I guess the big message that I would have, and I don't know how to say this without sounding like a grumpy old man, is that it's really important for college kids, especially in this time, to recognize and understand that their safety, their health, and the safety and health of a lot of the people around them will be driven in some cases by how much they are willing to abide by the rules that are pretty well understood at this point, which is wear a face covering. If you can't socially distance wherever you can. Use good hygiene, wash your hands, and just be smart. I mean, I've stood in front of this podium on a number of occasions and talked about the fact that almost all the contact tracing we've done has shown that the single biggest cluster creator in Massachusetts, and this is also true through some of the media reports we've seen on stuff going on both here and in other states, is unorganized, unsupervised, large gatherings where people didn't socially distance, didn't wear masks, and engaged in a lot of close contact. And given the number of people who can be infectious with this virus and asymptomatic, the whole idea you're actually going to know if somebody's sick or not and in a position to actually pass it on to you or you to pass it on to somebody else is really difficult. And I think the most important thing I would say to kids is wear the face covering, follow the rules, and recognize and understand that if you do that, your chances of both staying healthy, but your chances also of not being in a situation where you would make someone else unhealthy are much better, including your teachers, your proctors, your advisors. I mean, kids can say that, they don't get affected by this, but any kid in college is going to spend a lot of time around adults. And I just think it's really important for people to recognize and understand that there are ways people can behave that either make this less of an issue or more of an issue. And the more we do to make it less of an issue, the more we can do to get back to what people would like to say is something closer to normal. Thanks, everybody.